Hey everyone, Chad again. This video will focus on updating and maintaining Cloudblock if you've deployed it in a cloud environment, whether that's AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, or Oracle Cloud. Follow along to keep your system up to date. Let's get started. I've already pulled up the GitHub page, start there, and I've opened PowerShell. For Azure, Google Cloud, and Oracle Cloud are pretty much the same. AWS is a little bit different. I'll walk through the Oracle Cloud instructions. You can follow along if you've deployed an Oracle, Google, or Azure. For AWS, I'll do that at the end separately. Scrolling up to the top of the GitHub page and picking your cloud deployment. I'll pick Oracle and scroll down to the FAQ section. How do I update Pyholt and Wireguard Docker containers? You see in the next note there it says review the update instructions, and I've got 2 links. Those are links to how the developers suggest updating the containers. And it's important to note, especially if you've run a Pyholt before not using Docker, that the instructions are different. Cloudblock does follow their instructions, though I wanted to give a reference to how it's done. All right, so we're good. Cloudblock will do it as we go through these steps. Now I've got PowerShell open, but I haven't started Windows Subsystem Linux. I'll do that, and I'll cd to my home directory. We want to ensure Terraform is up to date. I'll grab that command, put my sudo password in. That's my Windows Subsystem Linux password, and we'll give that just a moment to update. Okay, Terraform is up to date, and I want to be in the OCI subdirectory of Cloudblock. If you're updating Azure or GCP, you'll be in one of those, and the instructions will say so. Next, we need to move our vars file. This is important. When you initially clone the Git project, you're given a vars file that you customize, right? You set your Pyholt password, the number of peer configurations for Wireguard, the type of VPN traffic, whether it's just DNS or all, and then you save that and you use it to deploy your project. Because we're pulling in a new version of the code, we want to move that vars file kind of out of the way. We want to make it untracked so that Git can update the code, and then we have a copy of our customized vars file, and it doesn't clash when any updates from the Git project. We can use this command. It's a simple move command, but it does a check to make sure that if the vars file already exists, that it doesn't overwrite it. And you can see that I've already moved my vars file previously, and it's telling us it exists and it's not overwriting. But go ahead and run that to move your customized vars file out of the way. That's for the next step, so we do a git pull, and I'll do the git pull. And you can see I'm already up to date. If there were any changes to the code, you'd see that there'd be a list of the files that had been changed. And then finally, we rerun the Terraform with our vars file, but this time we point it to pvars, the one that we customized but then moved. And then we'll give that a second to run. Okay, Terraform gave me my output almost immediately because there were no changes to make. It didn't prompt me for any changes. That's a good sign. None of my variables changed, and it's expected. All right, and if we look at the output, right, so this is an output you may be familiar with. It has been updated if you deployed several weeks ago, which is kind of nice. I've cleaned it up a little bit. So we can see our SSH instructions, if we want to get to the Pyholt web UI, the instructions for that, and the Wireguard configurations. But right here, this is what I'm interested in. Update/Ansible rerun. So the first steps, these are the actual instructions. So the first step is to SSH into the instance. So I'll grab that, paste it in, and I'm in my instance. Let me scroll back up to the instructions. If updating containers, remove the old containers. This brings the service down until Ansible is reapplied. That's okay, that's fine, that's what we're doing. So this will remove the Docker containers. It won't remove our customizations. Like if you've updated the Pyholt to use a new ad list that doesn't come by default, or you've set up additional groups to categorize your traffic, all of those will remain. Your peer configurations for your VPNs, those will remain as well. But we'll remove the Docker containers. So I'll run that. Pretty quick. Just like we did a git pull on our local machine, we're going to do a git pull on the machine running in the cloud, our Cloudblock instance. I'll paste that in. And we can see a lot of changes. I haven't updated my cloud instance in some time. If I scroll back up, we can see a few more steps. So we need to reapply the Ansible playbook with our custom variables. Just the same variables that we had in our vars file, along with some that are auto-generated. We need to copy and paste these commands. So I'll grab all of them, copy, and right-click to paste them in. Ansible is going to run now. It's going to rebuild the Docker containers with our customizations, and we'll give that just a moment to run. While Wireguard is running, and it's almost done, it's uploading peer configurations to the storage again. I'm going to open another PowerShell prompt, go into Windows Subsystem Linux, and show a new feature. So if I go to Cloudblock OCI and run Terraform output again, we can see the same output that we get when we run Terraform apply, which is really nice. I want to go to the Wireguard configurations. Open this up, paste it in, I'll log in, and you'll see there's a new folder. We just had a Wireguard folder before. We now have a Pyholt folder. If I expand that, you can see there's a backup. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There you go. So there's a backup. Every 12 hours, the Pyholt will be backed up to your Oracle storage, Azure storage, or Google storage, depending on which provider you use, or AWS as well. And then for Wireguard, the same thing. So we still have all our peer configurations, but we also have a backup of Wireguard, including those peer configurations. That's run because those don't generally get updated. Your peer configurations stay the same once you've deployed. That backup only occurs once. And this is useful if you ever lose your cloud instance. If your cloud instance dies, whether you're for any of the cloud providers, if there's something happens to it, it needs to be destroyed, or there's an updated version of Ubuntu and you want to run Ubuntu, when you run Ansible, it will pull in, if these backups exist, it will pull these in and restore them. It's really nice. And you can actually see that. So Ansible just finished up, and you can see the Pyholt backup service has been deployed. That's a new feature that got updated within the last couple weeks. This is mid-December 2020. I added that feature maybe the beginning or a week ago or so. So around the early December of 2020, I've added that. And when we've run Ansible just now, it included that feature. All right, everything's good to go. We are done. Our updates are good. If I run sudo docker ps, if I expand this out a little bit, 4 minutes ago, all of the Docker containers were respawned, recreated, and they're the newer versions of those Docker images. So the Pyholt got an update, Wireguard got an update, Cloudflare, and the web proxy. For Google Cloud, Azure, and Oracle Cloud, you're good to go. I'll now switch over to updating AWS, as it's just a little bit different. Most of the steps are the same. AWS deployments, I'll start from the GitHub project page again. This time though, I'll switch over to AWS. Scroll down to the FAQ section and find the section labeled How do I update my Pyholt and Wireguard Docker containers. The first part of these updates instructions state to review the Pyholt and Wireguard container update instructions. That's important, especially if you've run a Pyholt before and it wasn't in a Docker container. The instructions are different, right? So if you've run Pyholt before, you may be familiar with the up or update command. We don't do that for Docker containers. Cloudblock follows the instructions provided by the developers, and the links to how the developers suggest doing it are these two links here for Pyholt and for Wireguard. Let's continue. So we need to ensure Terraform is up to date. I'm going to open Windows Subsystem Linux. So we'll open PowerShell and then type in WSL to get into Windows Subsystem Linux. And I always like to be in my home directory to start. So I'll cd space tilde or the squiggly line. Let me resize my window just a bit. All right. Now I know Terraform is up to date, but if you haven't run this in a while, it's important to put in your sudo password for Windows Subsystem Linux, and I'll give this just a moment to. Next, we need to be in the AWS subdirectory of Cloudblock. Move the vars file to be untracked by Git. The vars file is the file that we customized and set our Pyholt password in, the number of Wireguard peer configurations. That needs to be moved out of the way so that when we run the next step, which is git pull, it doesn't conflict with the original code, the default code. This is a simple move command, but it makes sure that we don't overwrite our vars file if we run it once already. So I'll run it, and we can see that the response here is that my pvars file exists, it's not overwriting. That's because I've already run this once, but go ahead and do so if you haven't. And then finally we do a git pull. Actually, I'll type that one out. We can see that there was one change, nothing too important. But if you haven't run git pull in a while, you may see a significant number of changes. Run terraform apply with our vars file, which we now call pvars, to see the update instructions. I'll grab this. I'll hit enter for terraform apply. Terraform will output any changes that need to be made. So it's going to check the services that we've already deployed versus the Terraform code and our customized variables. We get an output here. Let me expand this a bit. We can read it. We see the Terraform output, which is one of the resources, changes just a bit to give us instructions on how to update our containers. And we can also see things like some of the S3 files have been updated. These are the playbooks. Everything looks good. Nothing's going to be destroyed, which is nice, unless it's something that isn't needed any longer. I'll type in yes to accept the changes. And we have our output. We can see the standard things like the web UI, the URL, how to SSH into the instance, the Wireguard configurations, and then we also have this Ansible update/Ansible rerun section. And this will show us how to update those Docker containers. This is what we're after. So we can see here the first command is to move the variables file to be untracked. We've already done that. That was also included in the README. It's very important to do so, and we've done it already. You could certainly run this command. If I run it now, it will just tell me that I've already run the command, right? The vars file already exists. We don't need to overwrite it. We also want to git pull. We've already done that. We can see if there are any updates. I'll run git pull again just to show we're already up to date. And then we want to note any new variables. This is an optional command. You certainly don't need to do it, but it will show you the difference between your vars file and the default that comes with Cloudblock. And then finally, the updating container instructions. So I'm going to SSH to my instance. I'll type in yes. All right, if I scroll back up to the next set of instructions, we want to remove the Docker containers, right? So this will remove Cloudflare DDo, Pyholt, web proxy, and Wireguard. This brings down the services until Ansible is reapplied, but that's okay. We're going to do that in the next steps. There we go. The containers have all been destroyed. We exit from our remote instance line, which starts the SSM tool. So SSM is something unique to AWS. That's why we have special instructions for AWS. We use SSM to rerun the Ansible playbook. So I've copied that to my clipboard. I'll do that one more time, copy the clipboard. Let me scroll back down to the end here. I'm on my local machine. I've exited from the remote instance in the cloud, and I will run the association. I can actually SSH back into my AWS instance. And if I run htop, we can see that the SSM service is running. Python 3 is doing a check for updates. We'll give that just a second to run. And then once it is done, we can see if our containers have respawned. Also, I should mention, we have that README. And if we go back up to how we deployed it originally, there's the want to watch Ansible set up your virtual machine. You can rerun these same commands to see that output one more time. So I'll do that. Let me grab this command. I'm already SSH'd into the machine. It's a long command, grab the whole thing. I'll Control-C out of htop. And if I paste it in, we can see it looks like the playbook is done. Good to go. Run sudo docker ps, and we can see the containers started all about 1 minute ago. Everything's good to go. My containers have been updated. All of my original files, like my peer configurations, are fine. They haven't been changed. I've got the latest version of Pyholt, the latest version of Wireguard. My Pyholt configurations are still there as well. So if you've made any changes, like you added an additional add list or set up a whitelist, those will remain. And then also there's new features, right? So one of the new features I added fairly recently was an auto backup service. If I exit this Terraform output, this will show me the same output that we got when we ran Terraform apply, but doesn't make any changes, which is kind of nice. I'm going to go to my Wireguard configurations URL. I'll need to log into my AWS account. If we take a look, there are some new items. So right off the bat, there are my peer configurations, but I've also got a Wireguard backup. This is a backup of the Wireguard service and the peer configuration. So if my instance ever went down, for example, and that could happen if I want to rebase Cloudblock on a new version of Ubuntu, and I need to destroy the old instance and then recreate the instance, this Wireguard backup will have my Wireguard configuration. It'll have all my peer files, so that if ever the instance needs to be redeployed, Ansible will pick up this file in S3 and redeploy Wireguard without me needing to rebuild all of my peer configurations, put the new one back on my phone, etc. And then if I go up one from here I can see that I also have a Pyholt backup as well. And this backup runs every 12 hours. Because you might be making changes or your lists may be updating themselves, this will run every 12 hours as a service on the machine that we built. And the same thing will happen if we ever rebuild Cloudblock. If we use, say, a newer version of Ubuntu, or the instance dies, maybe there's a outage in AWS and our instance dies, we need to rebuild the instance from scratch. We have a backup. Ansible will pull this backup of Pyholt onto itself and rerun Pyholt with this. All of our configurations will be saved. All right, we are good to go. Thanks, everyone. Again, reach out in Discord if you have any questions, comments. Updates are certainly not an easy process. This might be the hardest portion of running a service like this. But if you've gotten this far, you are good to go. Discord, if you have questions, ideas, comments, more than appreciated any feedback. The link's in the description of this video.